Sometimes the greatest loss isn't someone we love, but someone we never truly got to know. That truth hit Jake Harrison hard as he stood in the charred ruins of his father's land in Northern California. Samuel Harrison, once a brilliant environmental scientist, had died without warning, leaving Jake only a burned-out cabin and 300 acres of blackened forest. Everyone around Jake told him it was worthless. Neighbors mocked him. His ex-wife sneered that he was clinging to ashes instead of securing their son's future, and even his teenage boy Marcus begged him to move on. But deep inside, Jake couldn't. There was a pull he couldn't quite name, a blend of guilt, hope, and desperation. His father had been a ghost in his life, a hermit who vanished into the hills for decades. Yet here Jake was, clutching a letter that had arrived 3 days too late to say goodbye. That envelope hinted at research materials of unknown value, words that sounded like nothing and everything at the same time. Sitting in his cramped apartment, bills piled high, rent unpaid, and Marcus watching with worried eyes, Jake began to wonder if there was more to his father's silence than abandonment. Maybe Samuel had left him more than land. Maybe, hidden in those ashes, was the truth about the man he'd resented for years, and a secret powerful enough to change everything. When Jake finally drove to Cedar Ridge with Marcus, the devastation looked like another planet. Towering trees had been reduced to skeletal stumps, soil smothered in ash even after 2 years of rain, silence where wildlife once roamed. Yet amid the ruin, small patches of deliberate new growth caught Jake's attention. Sprouts and flowers that shouldn't be alive were thriving. Near the ruined cabin, Marcus found a weathered journal, initials burned into the cover. S.H. Samuel's handwriting filled the pages, not just scientific notes, but reflections on regret, legacy, and a desperate attempt to make amends. Samuel admitted he had failed as a father, but wrote that maybe his work could stand as an apology, not only to Jake, but to Marcus and future generations who would need restored forests to survive. The pages spoke of accelerated regeneration, soil recovery beyond known science, and experiments hidden across the burned land. As Jake read, something shifted. For the first time, he felt possibility instead of ruin. Marcus, watching with wide eyes, asked the one question that cut through all doubt. "Dad, do you think we could make something of this place?" For the first time in years, Jake saw a genuine smile on his son's face, and that was enough. He called his landlord, gave notice, and told Marcus to pack. Whatever they found on this land, it was worth more than drowning slowly in Sacramento. They were going to rebuild not just the cabin, but their lives. The first days on the property were brutal but revealing. Jake and Marcus pitched camp in the least damaged section of the cabin, using salvaged lumber to patch gaps and clearing debris by hand. It was hard work, but Marcus threw himself into it, surprising Jake with determination. Then came their first discovery. Buried beneath layers of ash, Marcus struck stone carved with strange symbols, geometric yet organic, and marked with Samuel's initials. Moments later, a woman appeared, Elena Vasquez, a botanist who had consulted with Samuel in secret. She explained that his experiments had defied scientific expectations. Forest patches were regenerating decades faster than possible. But before Jake could ask more, black SUVs rolled into the clearing. Out stepped David Kellerman of Biogenesis Corporation, a pharmaceutical giant with endless money and lawyers. He offered Jake $2 million to hand over the land and research. For a broke single father behind on rent, it was more money than he'd ever dreamed of. But Jake looked at the stone, at the journal, at Marcus. Something in him hardened. He refused. Kellerman's smile vanished, replaced with veiled threats about contracts, patents, and courts. When the SUVs left, the forest seemed darker, as if warning Jake, this was only the beginning. The next morning, Jake realized just how deep the danger ran. Samuel hadn't been working alone. Rose Crowfeather, an elder from the local Yurok tribe, approached their camp, revealing that she had helped Samuel integrate indigenous ecological knowledge with modern science. What Samuel discovered, she said, wasn't just accelerated regrowth, it was harmony. Plants, fungi, soil, and animals, all connected in ways Western science barely recognized. Rose handed Jake a carved wooden key that opened a hidden hatch beneath the forest floor. Beneath the ashes lay Samuel's true workshop, an underground laboratory glowing with living plants, data screens, and carefully preserved seed pods that pulsed faintly with crystalline light. This was Samuel's restoration chamber, a place where ancient knowledge and cutting-edge science fused into something revolutionary. Jake felt both awe and fear. Samuel's letter confirmed it. The seed pods could restore forests in months, but in the wrong hands they would become a license to destroy. Logging companies could clear-cut and replant endlessly, stripping the earth for profit. That's why Samuel had hidden them and why Biogenesis wanted them so badly. Jake understood now this wasn't just about inheritance. It was about protecting something far bigger than himself. Over the next weeks, Jake, Marcus, Elena, and Rose worked tirelessly in the restoration chamber. Marcus revealed a surprising instinct for reading growth patterns, almost as if the land itself was speaking to him. Elena brought scientific rigor, translating Samuel's unconventional methods into data that could stand in court. Rose reminded them all that restoration was about relationship, not control. The forest healed because it remembered how to heal. But their progress was interrupted when Biogenesis returned, this time with federal agents claiming Samuel's work involved unregulated biotechnology. They threatened to seize the land. Sheriff Davis, a local lawman, stood his ground, insisting they needed court orders, but Jake knew it was only a matter of time. That night around the fire, Tommy, Rose's grandson, joined them. A quiet young man, he explained how Samuel had taught him to read soil signatures, the hidden messages plants left behind. The seed pods weren't genetic modification, he explained, but memory made physical tools to help the forest remember its own resilience. His words struck Jake deeply. Samuel hadn't been playing God. He had been listening. But now Jake had to decide, would he risk everything to continue that work, or would he sell out and run? The answer came with stolen documents delivered by an anonymous ally. Inside were Biogenesis's secret plans. They had tracked Samuel for years, waiting to seize his discoveries. Their strategy was chilling, patent the methods, commercialize the pods, and sell restoration services to industries that would then have no incentive to preserve nature. Worse, the documents revealed a spy had been leaking details of Samuel's work. Trust became fragile within the group, but there was no time to dwell. Biogenesis had already filed for mineral rights and planned a luxury resort that would cut through the forest. Jake realized fighting in court was hopeless. They had to go bigger. Tommy proposed unleashing the protocols across the land immediately, creating undeniable results before Biogenesis could shut them down. A living forest reborn in months would be impossible to bury in legal filings. Marcus, eyes alight with determination, agreed. If we don't fight now, we lose everything. The decision was made. They would risk everything to prove Samuel's vision to the world. For Jake, it wasn't just about land anymore. It was about his son's future and his father's legacy. The race began. For 2 relentless weeks, the team worked day and night, planting seed pods, treating soil, and guiding recovery across hundreds of acres. They labored with urgency, knowing Biogenesis would return with court orders. Slowly, the miracle unfolded. Shoots rose from barren soil overnight. Moss spread across blackened stone. Young trees climbed skyward as if eager to reclaim the sky. Wildlife returned, tentative at first, then in abundance, birdsong breaking the silence, deer grazing where ash once choked the ground. Even Marcus, once a restless teenager, found purpose, his hands steady, his voice strong, his eyes carrying a pride Jake had never seen before. But just as the forest began to breathe again, Biogenesis struck back. This time, Kellerman arrived with agents and legal muscle, demanding entry, threatening to quarantine the entire property. Rose stood unyielding, invoking tribal sovereignty. Alina countered with meticulously dated logs proving Samuel's independence, and Sheriff Davis blocked their seizure attempts. For hours, the standoff teetered, and then something unexpected happened. Reporters, tipped off by environmental allies, arrived with cameras. For the first time, the story wasn't hidden in shadows. It was out in the open. The world was watching. In the end, Biogenesis didn't retreat because of law or threats. They retreated because they had lost control of the narrative. Images of a forest reborn in record time spread across the media, inspiring awe and outrage. Samuel Harrison's name transformed from that of a hermit scientist into a symbol of hope. Jake, Marcus, Alina, Rose, and Tommy became the guardians of a movement larger than themselves. Yet Jake knew the battle wasn't over. Corporations would regroup, governments would circle, and skeptics would challenge. But as he stood with Marcus beneath the first green canopy of their restored land, he understood the real inheritance his father had left him. It wasn't seed pods or secret chambers. It was purpose. Samuel had given Jake the chance to be more than a failed carpenter or struggling father. He had given him a fight worth facing. Turning to Marcus, Jake saw not just his son but the future, a young man ready to protect what mattered. And with quiet resolve, Jake whispered to himself, "We will make something of this place." If you've been moved by this story, don't just listen, carry it forward. Subscribe, share it, and remember, sometimes the ashes we inherit are not the end, but the beginning.